And for me, it was on my way back to a 30-day treatment center that I'd already been to, that I BS my whole way through. I was crouched down inside of an airplane, smoking pills off of foil. And I thought to myself, this is U.S. federal airspace. I have a prescription pills that are not my prescription, and I'm smoking on an airplane. So if I were to get caught right now, like, I'm going down for a very long time. And I still kept doing it. And I was like, I have an addiction issue, and I'm an addict, and I need to figure this out. That was the straw that broke the back, was when I made the realization and I accepted the fact that I was just like everybody else in there. I just wasn't getting caught.
What is up, Superior Nation? Thank you for downloading this episode. I'm so glad that you're listening to this right now, because I want to throw some stats at you about the opioid crisis in the United States. I'm going to be covering a wide variety of subjects today in relation to statistics, and I think it's very important to educate yourself on the things that are going on in this country right now. So looking at the opioid epidemic by the numbers, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 130 people die every day from an opioid-related drug overdose. 10.3 million people misused prescription opioids in 2018. 2 million people had an opioid use disorder in 2018. And there are also some stats in here about heroin. 808,000 people used heroin in 2018. Out of that number, 81,000 people used heroin for the first time. And 15,349 deaths attributed to overdosing on heroin in a 12-month period ending in February 2019. That is insane. 2 million people misused prescription opioids for the first time, and 32,656 deaths attributed to overdosing on synthetic opioids other than methadone in a 12-month period ending in February 2019. Now, keep in mind that these statistics are just in the United States alone. They're not worldwide collective. So the 130 a day that die from opioid use is a big number, and we need to educate ourselves. We need to really take a deep dive in this crisis and try to think of alternate methods for pain management. And I have a great conversation today with Jake Evans. Jake is a former law student body vice president, decorated national model, United Nations delegate, and he also harbored a pretty heavy opioid addiction, which has taken him to the dark side and back. And he's been able to transform himself into a professional success coach, peer recovery coach, motivational speaker, and also an admissions counselor. And he's helped hundreds of families and loved ones navigate the beginning stages of the recovery process. I'm excited about this conversation. So let's go. Let's get this thing started. Let's talk about recovery.
I'm Jacob Evans, and this is your Superior Self.
What is up, Superior Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Your Superior Self. Usually I come in hot and heavy with a pretty legit quote from a powerful book that I've been reading. However, I'm going to read you a pretty inspirational blog post from one of my favorite authors, Peter Diamandis. And I think it's important, especially with what's going on right now in the world with the coronavirus. So this blog is titled Fear versus Reality. I'm going to read not the entire thing, but the majority of it. So stick with me here. Over the past week, our amygdalas, the fear centers of our brain, has been in overdrive. As the coronavirus and anxiety spread, I'm concerned by the level of pandemic fear circulating through our news and social media. The goal of this blog is to give you a thoughtful alternative to fear, to contextualize what you are hearing. Let's talk about the death rates. While this is no apples to apples comparison, how we react to death is primal. And when we hear about the coronavirus induced deaths, we go on red alert. But allow me to contextualize the numbers for you. Disclaimer: the below compared populations are different. China versus world, and infectious diseases do not maintain a consistent daily average, but the point still stands. On the worst day of the coronavirus in China, February 10th, 2020, 108 people died. But on a given day globally, 26,283 people die of cancer. 49,041 people die of cardiovascular diseases, and 4,383 people die of diabetes. Meanwhile, suicide takes an average of 2,191 lives. Mosquitoes, I didn't know this number is pretty high, take the lives of over 2,740 people. And humans kill an average of 1,287 fellow people every single day. Now, I think this blog covers two parts. The first part being the numbers and answers questions like, should I travel? Do I overstock my pantry? Is the world coming to an end? And he goes and he looks at the data and he compares the statistics of the coronavirus to that of the typical influenza. And then the second part is a separate blog written by Dr. Paul Sachs of the Harvard Medical School, which is a classmate of his, and it's pretty legit. And I'm going to read a little bit of that for you as well. So let's go into part one, which are the numbers. So during the 2017-2018 flu season, CDC figures put U.S. influenza deaths at roughly 80,000. Meanwhile, global estimates indicated anywhere between 290,000 and 650,000 influenza-associated deaths from respiratory causes alone. That is insane. And in terms of deaths from influenza-induced lower respiratory tract infections, a 2019 study estimated about 99,000 to 200,000 deaths for the 2017-2018 flu season. The following year, CDC figures estimated about 35.5 million Americans fell ill with the flu, resulting in 490,000 hospitalizations and 34,200 deaths. And since this past October, the regular flu has infected as many as 49 million and killed about 20,000 to 52,000 in the U.S. alone. Now, by comparison, on a global scale, the coronavirus outbreak has infected over 90,000 people as of early March, resulting in about 3,400 deaths worldwide. That's today's stat. While the fatality rate of the coronavirus now appears to be slightly higher than that of a typical flu, which range from 1.4% to the World Health Organization's 3.4%, the toll of the common flu is staggeringly higher than that of the coronavirus. Now, concern. Yes, there is concern because with any infectious disease, you have to be concerned about it, right? But knowing these numbers can help limit our fear of the unknown and battle our amygdalas against irrationality. Now, part two of this is a lengthy blog post from Dr. Sachs. However, I'm just going to go over some frequently asked questions that were given to him and some answers, just because I just don't feel like reading it all. Question: my baby has a pediatrician's appointment next week, and the doctor's office is right next to the hospital. Is it safe to go? Answer: yes. Question: should I wear a mask while commuting to work, on the T or the public transportation? Answer: only if you're sick, because the mask will protect others. Otherwise, masks probably don't do anything to protect you. Question: I had a trip planned for a year to Australia and New Zealand, and I'm supposed to leave in early April. Should I cancel now and get a partial refund? Answer: only cancel if the anxiety of going would make you not enjoy that trip. Question: I just got back from France and have a bad cough, sore throat, and a chill. How do I know if it's the flu or coronavirus? Answer: we can't really tell. Reach out to your doctor and see about getting tested. Common sense. Question: should I avoid Corona beer? Answer: you're an idiot. No, I'm just kidding. There is no coronavirus linked to the Corona beer, but in my opinion, it's not very tasty. All right, and I wanted to read these stats for you just to kind of put things in perspective. I don't know if you guys have heard these. I don't know if you guys have been, following the coronavirus, which I'm sure you have. However, I think the scariest part for me is how we've been programmed to fear these types of outbreaks. And you see it, you go to Target, everything's sold out, from toilet paper to, Clorox, bleach wipes, whatever they are. You go on Amazon, you can't get masks, you can't get sanitizer. It's crazy. The supply chain is all jacked up. You look at China, the world economy is taking a deep dive this week. And that's what bothers me. It's not the statistics of the coronavirus, not at all. It's the pandemic, the fear, the stress that the press is putting out to us. And my advice to you guys is to look at the statistics and use common sense. Use common sense. Think for yourselves. Don't let the media persuade you to think anything different. And I know that's hard to say. I mean, we're in an election cycle right now, and I know a lot of banter, a lot of things are being said back and forth across party lines. I don't like talking about this. It just sucks. Like, I just don't like talking about it. I mean, you look at the world economy, it's taking a shit. You look at the election, people, you don't know who to trust anymore. You go on Facebook, people are talking about the coronavirus, and it's just a fucking mess. Like, it is. And I'm sitting here with a beer and doing this podcast on a Saturday night, and my wife is working at a hospital, and I'm worried about, just from my anxieties of her catching something there and bringing it home, and then we're gonna have to deal with three weeks of kids, just transferring shit back to each other, and I'm sure the school's gonna shut down. I'm sure everything's gonna shut down over something that is not producing numbers of the influenza. And it's sad. It's just sad to me that that's where we're at. Like, we're just at a point where we fear all. We can't think for ourselves. We want to look for quick hacks on statistics. We want other people to tell us how to think. And it just pisses me off. And I'm sorry that I'm using this as a platform right now. And I apologize to Jake, because he's probably like listening to this and he's like, what are you talking about, Troy? But I have to say it. Look at the statistics. Look for yourself. Like, you should always be buying bottled water and storing it, and just in case something happens. You should always be buying extra toilet paper. You should always be buying extra sanitizer just because it's healthy. You should always be washing your hands. You should always be doing these things. But, we have an outcry for this virus that we never heard of before. I mean, that's scary. I mean, I'll give you that. I mean, it's scary that this virus came out of China and we didn't know really anything about it, and it's very contagious. And 20% of the people that get it have to be hospitalized. That's scary. Yeah, I'll give you that. However, you look at the death rates, 3.4%. I mean, I hate to sound like this, but I'll take that. I mean, 100%. It's just everything else that's associated with it that scares the shit out of me. Wash your freaking hands. That's all I can say. Wash your freaking hands. Cover your coughs. Seriously. That's all you can do to prevent this from getting it. You'll probably be in the house for 3 weeks when you get it. Your kids are going to drive you crazy. They're going to get it. They're going to be missing school left and right. And then spring's going to happen, and we'll be back to, worrying about something else. But again, you guys, I just want you guys to look at the statistics, make up your own minds. Don't let social media, don't let the media dictate how you live your lives. Live it to the fullest. So with that said, I would love to hear what you guys have to say on the subject. Your thoughts on how they're programming us and how they're collecting our data to predict how we're going to react in the future for some other epidemic, and they'll change the variables, and they'll add this here and add that there, and it'll be totally pandemonium. But anyway, you can find me at yoursuperiorself.com. Leave me a message on social media: Facebook Trey Downs, Instagram TDowns80, and on Twitter at DownsTrey. I want to know your thoughts. So with that said, let's get back to the reason why we're here, and that is because we have a kick-ass interview for you today. Jake Evans joins the show. He struggled with addiction, substance abuse, and now he helps others find personal development strategies. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Jake Evans. Jacob, I want to say thanks, man. Thank you for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it, man.
Of course. I'm glad that we were able to make the connection, and I'm glad to be here.
So tell me, what do you got going on today?
Well, so it's interesting, right? Like whenever we were first speaking, I was really drawn to one, where you're at geographically, and two, the other thing that I was really drawn to is just this notion that like you can be your best self. And me being somebody that came from high achievement background all along the way, having this substance abuse background as well. Chasing my superior self has been something that I've really latched on to. And you and I talked a lot about what it is that I believe that you're doing for the community and what the community itself needs to do, speaking specifically to your geographic region. But it's just, I'm again just super blessed to be here and be talking to you. I'm really excited for what I think we can do together.
Yeah, absolutely. How did it start for you? Like, how did this whole entire journey, like, come to fruition?
Yeah, it's interesting that you ask. I recently was talking to somebody about this. I gave a round of speeches at a couple of churches, actually, speaking to some youth groups. And I think that ultimately for me, it came from a longing to want to connect, and even more specifically, longing to be accepted. And so when you ask how did it start, I think it started from a super young age. Like I'm from Martinsburg, West Virginia, super small town, but really close to Baltimore, DC area. And for me, because you're right on that break between like rural versus urban. And so for us, it's like if you didn't fall within that tight knit little box and you were on the outside liar, like one way or another, if you weren't that 70%, um, during my generation, they wanted to slap a label on you and give you medications. Back then it was ADD or ADHD. They wanted to give you things like Ritalin and all this other stuff. They wouldn't really like cater to who you were as an individual and try to like map schooling around how like what you needed in order to grow. And so I was always kind of like ostracized because I always wanted attention. I wanted to connect with people, but I didn't know how to do it. So I always acted out and was class clown type scenario. And when I got into music, it was my first opportunity to really grab hold of an opportunity to get in touch with myself and learn how to process through emotions. Because again, I didn't know how to do this stuff. And just having that music was really crucial for my emotional growth. But I was 13, 14 years old playing with people that were 19, 21, 20 years old. And I was exposed to a lot of things. And so when I saw those people smoking weed, drinking after the show, I gravitated towards it and I did it. And it was like instantaneously instant social acceptance. And again, like I was younger, much younger than other people in my high school, like starting to do these things. And by the time that they caught on, whenever they were like 16, 17, I had already started. And so like I was cool with those guys now. So I was cool with the age group ahead of me, and then I was cool with my own age group. And I just attributed substance to social acceptance. And that was true for a while into college. And then my thing pushed beyond experimentation and really dove into substance abuse and then eventually addiction.
So were you diagnosed with like ADHD or anything like that?
It's interesting you ask. To be fair, no, I wasn't. Did the school system think that I was? Absolutely 100%. I had an interesting situation whenever I was in first grade. Like, again, I was always acting out. And so they kept trying to say that I was ADHD. And what wound up happening is that I had this guidance counselor from my school saying that I was, I had attention hyperdeficit disorder. And then I had my therapist, who I was seeing at the time, because my family was going through some stuff, saying that like, no, this kid is gifted. And like, you just don't see that it's just because he doesn't fall within that 70% doesn't necessarily mean he automatically gets this label. Like, let's get him tested and let's see. And I tested gifted actually. But I wonder, because a lot of us are public school, at least our generation, a lot of us are public school kids. How many people is that the plight of, right? That like, they just went along with what the school system said rather than actually getting the testing necessary to figure out if they were on the other end of the spectrum, because they can look super similar.
So what do you mean gifted? Like, you mean intelligent, like smart?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the,
Yeah.
What is the like medium or median? What's the like outlier scores? Like, what do you have to be gifted, and what do you have to be to test? I don't know. I guess test to be considered ADHD.
Well, it's so they're super similar. The main difference between the two is your actual IQ. Like that's like the
Mm,
and not necessarily meaning that like you can't have ADHD or ADD and not be intelligent, but the thing is how do you cultivate those things, and is the person able to like be able to like focus for that time being? So can you cultivate that intelligence in a way that's able for them to understand the information that's being relayed to them, or do they need some sort of intervention in order for them to understand the information? What I mean by that is that an intervention can be like medication or things along those lines. But if you're somebody who's just gifted, right? So I want to like retract what I said. It doesn't mean that just because you're ADHD or ADD, it doesn't mean you don't have a high IQ. It just means that like for people who do have a high IQ, when they're bored, like the things that they're doing when they're bored taking standard classes will oftentimes look like what it does for somebody that has ADD or ADHD.
no, I agree. My son deals with that a little bit right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's very intellectual, like in the sense that he's in his own world,
Mm-hmm.
and he uses phrases and words that I would never ever use. Like it's insane. Like when I was that age, and it's just funny listening to him speak. Like he sounds so different than what I was at that age. And like we have a little bit of a problem with him forgetting things at school, not paying attention, not
Mm-hmm.
writing down homework,
Yeah.
and it kind of worries me a little bit. But it's just, at the same point, he's just not into it. Like he's just not excited about the work. Like he's so smart. Like if he's into it, like with the comic, like
Yeah.
he reads every night. Like he reads graphic novels, and
Mm-hmm.
he's very creative, and he creates his own stories. And if he's not into it, he's just not into it. But
Yeah.
that teachers have come up to us before and kind of mentioned to us maybe might want to get him tested, and I'm like, absolutely not, because I've seen
Yeah.
like some of the side effects that some of these prescription drugs have on the children nowadays, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
Well, not only I mean, it's interesting. So, how old your son?
9.
9 years old. Okay, so when I was your son's age, I had this thing called before I ever learned how to play an instrument, I had this thing called the Encyclopedia of Music. And what I had done is I took every single song that I ever liked that was ever popular to me, right? So it was filled with like Beatles songs, Weezer songs, like Green Day songs. It was just filled with everything. I wrote out every single lyric. I wrote out, so this is like during DSL days, so I could have probably looked it up, but it would have taken me forever. But I wrote down every single lyric, wrote down the rhyming scheme, wrote down the length of the song, why they chose certain words, at least my theories on it, the chords that they were using. Like I wrote down all of this stuff, and I had this huge binder called like the Encyclopedia of Music. So I understand, like when you say that your son, when he gets involved in something, that it's all of it, and that's exactly how I was. The schoolwork wasn't. It's not that it wasn't interesting; it just wasn't challenging. So
Hmm.
what was the point? What was the point in getting so involved into it? And when I was in elementary school, I had the same issue that your son does. It was like I wouldn't write down the assignments because what's the point? If I'm getting B's and A's on my tests, I don't necessarily need to do the homework.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the way that my brain just thought. And eventually, what wound up happening was that I just became really, uh, I just stopped liking authority because I
Mm.
always felt like they were trying to push me into a box or something that I didn't necessarily fit in. And it was like I'm performing better than over half of your kids that are in my class.
Mm.
Like why is this attention on me? Right? If like schools to go to school to get good grades, and most people are like having a difficult time getting good grades, and I'm coasting through it. Like why the microscope on me?
Yeah. No, I mean it makes sense because it's like, and he gets really emotional about it too, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
so he feels like the attention's always on him. He want
Mm-hmm.
everything's always negative for getting assignment sheets or forgetting to write something down because he's not paying attention, and then coming home. Like I'm so anti homework, and it's not even like it's not even like it's ridiculous the amount of stuff that he has to bring home. Like I can barely carry his book bag. Like he has
Mm-hmm.
like 4 or 5 books in his backpack, and he goes and does work all day, and he comes home, and then next thing you know, he's got to do homework, and his homework was a couple of hours. I mean, it's like crazy. Like I don't know. You talk about back problems. These kids are like hunchbacks, dude. Like you
Yeah.
see them walking into school, and they have like 6 books they got to carry. It's like, why can't they just do it all online? Like I don't know. I see it, and I see in my mind, I have this entire vision of like everything being online, and I don't know, maybe we can do that in the future, but it's like not for these kids. I don't think. I don't know, maybe it's the millennial speaking out from inside, but it's like I just see him and he carries all these books and he's just like so miserable when he has to get open like 4 or 5 different books, Spanish
Mm-hmm.
and religion and all these different things. And it's like, and he's just not interested in any of it. And it's like, I guess I could see how a teacher might be really concerned if they're not paying attention, but if they're not paying attention, they're just not into it. Right. Like that's not the
And then
traditional.
even then, if I'm being real, I think that it's more so on the responsibility of the teachers, and not to say that they don't do an amazing job, because I think that it's a difficult job to be a teacher, period. But I do think that we're seeing now, and I think that we've been seeing it for a while, where some teachers don't rise to the challenge of figuring out how to get those students engaged in learning.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'll say this, that when I was 10 years old, I had the best teacher. Like, she's still like one of my past. So I'm not, because I'm going to say this, I'm not going to tell you her name, but she's still like one of the passwords or one of my like cues for, sometimes they'll say like your favorite teacher. Like
Mm-hmm.
that woman's name is the one that still pops up as like a password cue for me,
Hmm.
because she changed everything, because she tapped in to what I needed to have tapped into in order for me to re-engage with school. She engaged me and like made it different for me. And I wish every single teacher was that way, but I had 3 of those over the course of my life. One in elementary school, I had one in high school, and then I had one in law school. And the one in law school wound up saving my life. The one in elementary school like wound up making me realize like I was worth it. So like that helped me get through the rest of elementary school and like kind of like put the blinders on what every other teacher was saying. The one that I had in high school just really like helped me she believed in me, and so that's what helped me get through high school. And then the one that I had in college like saved my life whenever I was suffering from addiction. So props out there to the teachers that are doing it, and I hope that more can rise to the occasion. And I think that it's a responsibility on them to help students like how I was, how your son is, to
Mm-hmm.
re-engage back into teaching. Like it needs to be a passion of theirs.
Yeah, no, it's hard, right? Because it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's 2 different systems. You got the education system and the learning system.
Yep.
And Richard Saul Wurman, who is the founder of TED, I actually had the honor of listening to him speak recently, and he basically defined the difference is, education system is a checklist or, check boxes to, getting grades in a certain subject and learning,
Mm-hmm.
the basics of like, English, mathematics, science, and learning the foundation of that. But a learning system is something that the way he worded it was just insane. He was like, learning system is remembering what you're interested in. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of doing the broad strokes of the education system and learning everything, the learning system is basically going in and learning something that you're really interested in. So, I mean, it can be tough, which is really tough for the teachers because obviously the general education system is very boring to
Yeah.
kids. And to really, I mean, you're still developing, right? You're still immature. Your mind's still developing. Your brain's still developing. I mean, it's insane it's hard for, these teachers. But if you can break into their learning modes and what really, it's like just connecting with them and finding what interests them and then honing
Mm-hmm.
in on that and then seeing how, when they connect with something like that, how they learn and then trying to take that process and applying to different areas.
Oh yeah, because I was just like your son. I loved graphic novels. I loved comic books. I loved drawing, sketching, creating, And so for me, when she found my comic books that I was making in my desk, she encouraged me to take those English assignments. So this is my favorite fourth grade teacher. She encouraged me to take those English assignments, those books about like where the red fern grows and things along those lines, and illustrate things for it. She's like, why don't you illustrate your favorite part of the book? And then that would encourage me to actually read the book. So then I could find my favorite part and then illustrate it and then turn it in. And then that was my version of the book report, is that I would orally give her why that was my favorite part. And then I didn't have to sit down and like write out some long tenuous book report. I could just illustrate something and give it to her, and it would kind of fit for the same thing. And so like, I'm with you. Like, she helped me learn and helped me figure out that like I can create my own relationships to these things, whether or not they're just assigned by teachers or not.
So you just had a son, right? Like, congratulations on that.
It's a daughter.
Daughter.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah. So congratulations on being a father.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this. Let's say your daughter gets into school and she has the same problems as you as far as paying attention, and you know they recommend that you get her tested for whatever reasons, and they recommend her taking, you know, medication. Like, what would you say to that?
100% no.
Yeah.
It would depend on what the like what exactly the medication was, but from what I know, and again, working in the substance abuse field and doing it for almost half a decade now, I know that the brain has a natural pharmacy, that it doesn't need this stuff. And specifically speaking, with things like ADHD and ADD medications, they're super, super, super similar to methamphetamine. Like, they're incredibly close. And I think about what it did to me whenever I was in college, because I did use these things as study aids whenever I was in college. Things like, see now the name's escaping me, Vyvanse and Adderall, things along those lines. When I think about those and what it did to me in college, I imagine like a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old taking those things. And I could never, ever fathom putting my child through that. Now, you'll notice a difference, right? If somebody truly has those difficulties, just to bear in mind, you said if it were like my situation. Now, she's undoubtedly going to have her own situations, and I'm going to have to take it as it comes. But if it were just like mine, you would know that like if somebody gets excited or hyped up after taking these things and they're having a difficult time, it's almost harder for them to concentrate. Like, yeah, they can focus on one little thing, but they might be concentrating on the wrong thing, right? So, or getting really excited or having their attention be diverted super easily. That means that they don't necessarily have that disease. And so it's not doing what it's intended to do, which is to help people focus and like help bring them in, like help slow their brain down. So I'm just not a huge advocate for medications, period, just because I know what it did for me and what it's done for a lot of other people. And I know that like the brain's super resilient. And I know that the natural pharmacy that exists within us, we can tap into at any given time. And it's just a matter of us doing so and being educated on how to do it. And for just me and my family, I would say that it would have to be a really, 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 really convincing argument as to why my kid would need to be on any medication before I would ever give it to them.
What about like antidepressants?
No.
No.
Again, the brain has natural pharmacy, and like I know that some situations for some people are different, and I'm not here to say that that's not the case. But I highly encourage anybody, like, one, antidepressants are not meant to be something that anybody's on long term. So I understand like a super difficult situation, you're finding it hard to get out of bed, you're struggling with thoughts of of harming yourself. I understand like you need immediate action, but it's not a long-term solution. All you have to do is look at the list of side effects that come from those medications, and you'll see that like the thing that's supposed to be an antidepressant can actually cause further depression. And it's like, well, that's a catch-22. Like, why is that the case? And it's because these aren't long-term fixes, right? Like the brain and human nature in general is meant to conquer, overcome, move beyond, neuroplasticity, cognitive restructuring. Like we're designed to move through these instances. And if we lean into each other and really learn how we work, and when I say we, I mean like ourselves. If we learn how we work and we work through these instances, you would be amazed what the brain can overcome. And again, this is coming from somebody that has suffered childhood trauma. This is coming from somebody that has gone through bouts of serious depression, thoughts of, so just to be completely honest, whenever I was 11 years old, I had thoughts of taking my own life and even made an overt action to do so. And that's not a normal action for an 11-year-old kid. So, I'm not just speaking from my soapbox. I'm speaking from experience and saying that now coming up on nearly 5 years, half a decade, it's like I haven't taken any medications.
Was the attempt, did it have to do with the drugs, or was it depression, anxiety?
Yeah. So again, being 11 years old, not fitting in, having a school system constantly tell you that you're not fitting in, that you're not like everybody else. You're a problem child. I got kicked out of religion class right around this time because I asked why the Bible had quotation marks. I was like, I don't understand if like the earliest account of Jesus being there was nearly like 60 years after his death. Why are there quotation marks? Quotation marks imply a direct conversation, like somebody's hearing this. And then, they didn't like that. And
what religion is this?
This was Catholicism.
Okay.
So I went to a Catholic school.
All right.
And so, for when I asked that question, when I was in a Catholic school, they kicked me out of religion class. And rather than like discipling me and teaching me why it was the case or like trying to help me understand it, I got kicked out. And that was kind of like one of the straws that almost broke the camel's back. And this would have been, I got kicked out of public school for a day because of behavioral issues. I almost got kicked out of Catholic school. And I remember my dad telling me that like if I got kicked out of this school, then I was going to be shipped away to military school. And like that's where they send kids like me. And I couldn't imagine not being around my family. And so I was like, maybe the world would just be better if I wasn't here, right? It's like everyone keeps telling me that I'm messing up and I'm not good enough. Like maybe it would just be better if I wasn't around. And I had that thought at 11 years old. And there's other things and other circumstances that all built onto that, but definitely anxiety, depression to an extent. And again, at 11 years old, that's not necessarily normal, right?
Did you act on that, or did you just kind of like?
Oh yeah, there was an action. So my dad actually walked up to me trying to, and I've never shared this with people on the air, but my dad actually walked up to me trying to strangulate myself with a belt. And it was probably, it was difficult for him to see. He told me to, we're from West Virginia. He doesn't know how to emotionally help his son who's going through this. He was just shocked to see it. It was like, think about what this would do to your mother. And to me, he's like, I never want to see anything like this again from you. And then that was it. And that was all that we talked. That was all that we spoke about it. I understood. I was like, okay, that's not an option. I can't do that. And he just proved to me that like he cares about me, which I think is like what I was really looking for in the grand scheme, because like they were talking about shipping me away. And so he had come up to apologize and walked in on that. And so I can't even imagine what he felt like. And he and I never spoke about it again. This is like probably only the 5th time I've spoken about it to anybody. But I think like we're talking about, kids that are outliers. And I think that it's important to talk about this because we are seeing teenagers, preteens, teenagers, a huge spike in not only just substance abuse, but we're also seeing a huge spike in teenage and preteen suicide rates. And so I think it's important to talk about these things and understand like, how to speak to your kids and what necessarily to look for.
Yeah, no, the key word is talk, communicate, right? Like, so my philosophy is, your dad's probably a baby boomer, so they don't necessarily talk their emotions. Like they don't really, they never really grew up with that type of like environment, right? Like communication. It was essentially, do as I say or whatever. What is it? What is this saying? It's like be seen but not heard or something like that. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah. Children should be seen, not heard. That's
yeah.
one of them. And then there's other ones like, well, here's what I attribute it to. If you want to know what I think, like most of our dads, and when I say our dads, I mean, people that are my age, your age. If you want to know what our dads were like, all you have to do is watch an episode of Leave It to Beaver, and like that's like what they wanted to be, right? Is that they wanted to be, they wanted to be that stoic rock of the family,
Hmm.
come home and like they were never changing. They didn't talk about feelings, but they gave us the lessons, right? It's not about the feeling, it's about what we should have learned from it, right? Like Andy Griffith, Leave It to Beaver, style parenting, where it doesn't matter like why we did what we did. It's just this is black and this is white. That's just
Hmm.
how it is.
Well, then
And
John
so
Wayne too, right? Like you had
yeah.
John Wayne. They wanted to be John Wayne. They wanted to be
Hmm.
that, like you said, that stoic type of figure. And no
Hmm.
one ever spoke about their emotions. They just kind of,
Hmm.
just went through life. And now we're changing it, right? Like we're the new dads coming in who I mean, we have problems too, right? Like we're the
Of
ones
course.
that want to be, communicate our feelings, but we still don't know how to do that, right? Because why is that? Because we have technology, right? Like I want to be heard, but it's usually through a text or it's usually through a
Oh yeah.
Facebook status or something like that, right?
And this is what we were talking about in the beginning, is that like arguably, right, we are the generation that's longing, and again, when I say we, I'm talking us, we're the generation that's longing the most for connection than any other generation, right? Maybe it's because of the way that our fathers were, or what have you. Technology definitely plays a role within that. So we weren't necessarily taught the art of connection. Technology makes it even harder because we're connected, but it's just pseudo
Mm-hmm.
connection.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of all these things, things like the opioid epidemic, like I don't think it's a coincidence that opiates in particular latch on to the part of the brain that's responsible for connection. And so you have these people that are all longing for connection, don't know how to connect because technology compounds it. And you and I are on opposite sides of the country right now, but we're connected, arguably. But do we really know how to get to the heart of what's going on with each other? And I would say that you and I probably, yeah, because I mean, even before we started this call, like we were talking about what was going on with me. I'm sharing things here that I don't necessarily share with everybody, and it's like, I've come to realize that the way that happens is by giving all of yourself to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
not some of yourself some of the time, all of yourself all of the time. And it's not up to me to decide whether or not people like that or not, right? It's just like, it's, this is me, this is who I am, and if you like it, great. If you don't, that's okay too, but ultimately it's like I might say something. If I give you everything, then like maybe one of the things that I give you helps anybody else that's out there that's listening to it, might help you with your son. I don't know, but the only way that I'll know is if I give you all of me. I can't filter it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
that that's what's different about some of the people in our generation is that, I mean, crap, like you see it on Instagram, filters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Camera filters. Like we're always filtering who we think that we should be versus who we are.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. It's I find myself doing it too. It's like, I want immediate response, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm used to getting that, right? Like a text
Mm-hmm.
message. I text message you, and you message me back, and I get that immediate
Mm-hmm.
response. And it's like in the real world, sometimes I can get lost in translation, and
Mm-hmm.
like we want the most connection, but we're the most depressed, we're the most loneliest
Mm-hmm.
because we don't really
Mm-hmm.
know how to we don't know how to connect face to face anymore.
Yeah. I was talking to, so Patricia's my wife. I was talking to her about this earlier, and it's like, we're we're super fortunate in that she works across the street from me, and like I met her sister first, and like we have like a really interesting story of how she and I wound up getting connected. But I think about it, and it's like, do people even ask each other out on dates anymore? Like, do people even know how to do that?
But they're
And it's like,
outsourcing that stuff now, right? Like there's
yeah.
apps that you can outsource, like to ask somebody out. You can actually outsource somebody to break up for you too.
Oh my gosh. Well,
It's nuts.
remember back in our day, AOL Instant Messenger.
Yeah.
So I remember getting my first girlfriend, in like middle school, elementary school, whatever, fifth, sixth grade, whatever it is, through that. And I had a girlfriend, and I'm doing air quotes right now. You can't see it, but that's what I'm doing. And I never talked to them in person, but I talked to them every day as soon as I got home there. We went to the same school. We're in the same class. We never spoke in person, but we spoke all the time whenever we were on AOL Instant Messenger.
Did you remember that? Like, I mean, back when that started, like people would sit at their desks all day and just, and remember we had the away messages and I'll be back in 5 minutes.
Buddy profiles.
Yeah.
And then MySpace came out, and then it became a MySpace thing. And then Facebook came out, and then it became a Facebook. Like, I remember every single iteration. Like, I remember building out HTML buddy profiles and stuff, and then like doing the same thing in MySpace. And then now whenever Facebook came out, it's like Facebook was roughly like junior, senior year at high school. And that became like, when you got into college, that became the way that like you connected with random people. It's just like
wasn't it something shallow though at the very beginning? It was like
for sure
to rank like females or something like that, or
as
far as like and then, looks.
And then like whenever I didn't get on it until I started running for government. So whenever I was in high school, I was in student body. I was in like student government and stuff, and so I started really diving into Facebook and stuff there, so I could like give people's names and then look them up on Facebook and then hound them to vote for me. And it was a really great tactic at the time in college, but now I'm sure it'd be a nuisance. But I think about those situations, and now to think about, you were talking about outsourcing dating. So I saw it go from, me asking girls out on AOL Instant Messenger, like 4th or 5th grade or whatever. And then now it's like Tinder and like Bumble and like all these other things. I don't even know. There's probably like a million other ones that I don't know of, but it's those things. And, that's like how people are connecting now. It's the same thing, same animal, same monster. So people are literally doing what we were doing whenever we were 9 or 10 years old, but they're 20, 30, 40, teenagers now, and they're never progressing. Like since AOL Instant Messenger, like the art really hasn't progressed that much at all.
Well, I mean, you've always written like notes, right? Like, do you like me? Do you want to be my girlfriend? We did that in high school. Or not, we did. Let's get this straight. I didn't do that in high school, but we did this in middle school.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like, it's just technology growing. So we somebody's always had somebody ask a friend, hey, go ask that girl if she likes me, right? Like it's always been
always
there.
had the middleman.
There's always been that.
I think it kind of stings a little bit less whenever you do it that way.
Well, the rejection, right? Like, you just don't want the rejection. But now it's kind of like we're trying to hack it. We want like instantaneous gratification. So like Tinder, like we don't want to go through the hassle. Like nobody wants to do the work. Nobody wants to do the work anymore of actually going and building relationships and actually, going on a date or whatever. Like they want instantaneous stuff. They want to hack everything.
When I was talking about this exact same thing yesterday with someone else. When I was, I'm going to call it courting, because I'm not going to call it dating, right? Like I think dating in this generation is way different from what Patricia and I were doing in the very beginning. I'm going to call it courting because I was just really, the very beginning was trying to convince her to be my friend, right? And then from there, it was like, okay, now like see the awesome man that I am. So then maybe you'll want to do something else with me. So I call it courting because I feel like,
but it's a process though. But it's a process.
For me, it was for her and I, it was a process. But you want to talk about instant gratification. Like there's, people who aren't necessarily like that are into hookup culture and things along those lines. That's just not me. It doesn't fall in line with my new lease on life or anything along those lines. So that is the way that people are, is that sometimes they use those things. You talked about hacking it. Sometimes they use it. And unfortunately it goes to, I don't think that there's a coincidence between like Me Too movements and things along those lines. Like it's like, people are starting to not appreciate that instantness of people just expecting that from a relationship. Do you know what I mean? Or a relationship in air quotes. It's like, it's, again, I'm going to call it the art of connection. Like we're losing it. And I think that because we're losing the art of connection, we're losing respect for each other as human beings, respect for each other, for ourselves. And the people that are going to wind up suffering are the next generation. That's why I think it's amazing that, there's so many dads now, people that are in our shoes that are like, let's figure out how we do this. Like, let's figure out what it looks like to communicate our emotions. So then our sons and our daughters aren't the ones that suffer as a result of it. Because if
Yeah,
we
and
don't look at it
yeah.
now, we never will.
And they always make fun of us because it's like, how are you feeling? Like, how does that make you feel? Because I mean, we're still learning, man. Like, I'm still learning how to
Yeah.
communicate with my kids. Like, I'll ask them how it makes them feel, and I try to understand their point of view. I mean, you think about it, like they're still developing their brains. Like, their brains are so immature, and it's like, here I am, a grown man, yelling at my kids for whatever rule they've broken, but they've watched me do the same thing, and it's confusing to them. So I mean, it's just you really, it is a new age kind of thing, like
Hmm.
communicating your feelings to your children and trying to understand them. And obviously I still have some old school in me where it's like it's my way, their highway, but it's like more or less like I want to communicate with them, and I want to know exactly what they're going through, so that way I can kind of connect with them on a level. I don't remember what it was like to be 9 years old, but
Yeah.
I can see the emotion, and I've experienced the same emotions as he is experiencing, and I'm going to try and walk him through it, right? Like to talk about that tragic incident that happened with you and your dad, like for me to walk up on that, like I don't even know what I would do. Like I know that I'd probably instantly, try to, get him out of whatever situation he was in the moment where he's trying to take his life. But, emotionally,
Yeah.
what would you do? Like, I mean, if you think
And then
about
there's
that, like,
yeah, and then there's follow up to it too, right? And it's like we understand these things now because like we're looking back on it with lens and like more understanding for the social schema of like what does this look like for people long term. And I can tell you that I love what you said. I've experienced the same emotions that he is experiencing now. That's called working memory, right?
mm-hmm,
And that's located within the hippocampus. And what that means is that for you, right, like you understand that like heartbreak at 30 years old is the same as heartbreak at 8 years old or 9 years old. Like, yeah, like what it took to break his heart may look different, but that feeling is the same.
yeah,
And then the only thing that changes is the circumstances or the facts, right? The emotions remain the same throughout the rest of your life. And like, yeah, you'll experience more and there'll be varying degrees, but they're all stored within working memory. And so for me, because like I never unraveled those things, I never understood why is it that I don't feel like I'm connecting? Why is it that I feel like that I don't fit in? Why is it that I'm looking for this instantaneous connection from other people and social acceptance and all these things and try to get outside of myself? And I did it through high achievement. I mean, like I kind of touched on it a little bit. I did, for my parents, they would look at this thing and be like, oh, this kid in high school, he's writing his own music and he's playing in a band. He's in jazz band. He's in show choir. He's a varsity football player. He's all A's student. Like he looks like he's doing great. I get pre-accepted into dental school. He's doing great. I drop out. Oh no, he's struggling a little bit. I get back into school. He's student body vice president. He's in National Model United Nations. He's accepted into law school. This guy's doing amazing. But on the inside, it's like I never did any of the work that I need to do to figure out what was really going on with me. And I had this addiction that was like progressing all the way through. And I think at first I was addicted to feeling anything other than what was going on with me. So that's why I started tacking on all this extra stuff. It's like I didn't want to think about what was happening inside of me. So that's why I did all this extracurricular stuff. And then after that, it was like, it's still there. Like, it didn't matter what I achieved or what I did, I still felt the same way. I was never feeling like I was fulfilled or happy. And then when I finally was in my second year of law school, I had progressed on to opiates. And it's a plight for a lot of people in Baltimore, DC, West Virginia, Ohio River Valley, like all along that area. It's terrible, and I fell victim to it, 6 years ago. But it's crazy to think that it all started from my very first emotion, and then not talking about that, and that
not being
compounding over
enough.
years.
Like, is that it? Like, not being enough? Like,
It's interesting, right? So it's like my dad's a dentist and family practitioner, self-made man, one of five. My mom is a presidential appointee, so that means that she's some like right directly underneath of a cabinet member, so super high up ranking government official. So I had two really, really, really high performing parents. And I just told you my story where it's like I'm, I'm not, I said gifted, but I don't like boasting. So let's just say that like I'm not stupid. And I don't think anybody is, but let's just say that like things come easier to me than what they do to other people, and I'm willing to work hard. So with that being said, it was like I would bring home like 95s or 93s on tests. My parents would be like, you left 7% of the information behind.
Mm.
And like that was kind of the standard that I had. And then on top of that, I have the school system telling me that like, I'm getting in trouble for everything. Because I'm trying to like make friends and I don't necessarily know how to do it. And so like I'm just trying to be funny. And for me, what's funny is a nuisance to the teacher. And it's like, and I have the extra time to do it because it doesn't take me as long to do the assignments as what it takes other students. Like, for instance, I remember being in first grade and there was a maze that you had to do. Remember those like little mazes that would have like start stops and like
Sure.
you had to make it from the start to the stop. So they said, find the quickest route with the least amount of barriers. And so I just drew a straight line, start to stop. And I turned it in 10 seconds. And the teacher was like, you can't do that. And I was like, yes, I can. It's like the shortest distance from here to here is a straight line in first grade. And she was like, yeah, you can't do that. She's like, there's barriers. And I was like, yeah, but assuming that like, there's these barriers, is like, I would just break right through them or jump over the walls. Like there's no barrier that you can't cross. And so I was like, it's a straight line. I'm done. And I turned it in.
Mm.
And then that was being non-compliant. But like, that's the way that my brain thought, is like just different from how other people were thinking at the time.
So when you were on the opioids, like how did you feel?
So the very first time that I took them, the only way to describe it is like, no matter what I achieved, no matter what I did, there was always a longing, like something. I always told myself, like, when you become student body vice president, you'll be happy. When you become the manager of your suit store, you'll be happy. When you do this, you'll be happy. When you get accepted into law school, you'll be happy. When you have the highest grade in your class, you'll be happy. And it's like, but I never was. And I felt all these pressures all the time. It's like, I need to be enough for my parents. I need to be enough for me. I need to be enough for the school. I need to be enough for all this stuff. And then when I took opiates the very first time, I didn't care anymore. It was like instantaneous, like a switch went off in me and I could breathe. And it's like, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter what people thought about me. It didn't matter what I thought about myself. It was the first time ever that my brain actually slowed down. And I was like, this is nice. Like, this is providing me like a calm that I've never had before in my entire life.
Mm. And how long were you on that? Like, how long were you doing that?
So that I actually got introduced to it on a National Model United Nations trip, and that trip was 4 days. And by the time that I had finished those 4 days, I was doing these things like pretty much day in, day out for about 4 days. I was physically addicted after 4 days. And I tried one day to not go with it. And I didn't realize I was addicted to it. I didn't know what opiate addiction was. I didn't know what opiate withdrawal was. So I started feeling like really sick, and I had all these things I had to do. I had work. I had to be student body vice president. I had to get to law school. And I was like, there's no way I can feel like this. So I used again. And then that started about a year and 3 months, roughly, until I tried to stop again. So I used every day until about a year and 3 months, whenever I realized like I can't be doing this all the time. And then by that time, I couldn't stop on my own. And then it was about another 3 months until I actually went into my first 30-day program. And then when I got out of that 30-day program, my using actually quadrupled. And then I went for about 60 days, and then I went back, and then that time it actually did work. So that's
why did it quadruple?
2-year addiction. So knowing what we know about addiction and knowing what we know about the cycle of addiction, I had convinced myself in my first 30-day program. I was looking around at the people that I was with. I was like, this guy's died 6 times and come back to life. This guy's hitting his wife. This person over here has been arrested. I'm not like these people. Like, they're not like me, and I'm not like them. I don't know if I belong here. And so I wasn't looking for it. I love what you said about your son. The feelings are the same. I wasn't looking for that. I was looking for everything that made me different. And because of that, I convinced myself that I was different. And before I was even finished 26 days, I'd already made, and again, keep in mind, like these things attach to the connection center of the brain. So like to me, opiates were my best friend. Like I was already making plans on how I could fit this thing into my new life. Like I can just use it on the weekends, or I can just do it in special occasions. So I was already compromising. And by the time that I got out, I drank a beer at the airport because I didn't think alcohol was my issue. So I drank a beer at the airport, which compromises my integrity. And when I did that, it wasn't maybe 48 hours before I'd done it, opiates again, like maybe 24 hours tops. And I was using opiates again. And then I did it 3 days straight, woke up, didn't feel sick at all. And then I remember having this conversation in my head. It's like, I can stop right now and then just never think about this again. Or, I keep going. And if I keep going, I'm going to have to ride this thing all the way out. And in that moment, I decided, I was like, I'm just going to do it again. So I used anyway. What happens is that when you're using because you feel crappy about something, right? Like there's an overwhelming emotion, stimulus, whatever happens, and you use to escape it. Then what happens after that is that spawns a feeling of guilt and shame. And then that guilt and shame is actually going to relate you into doing it again. So the guilt and shame will compound. And for somebody that, my parents and everybody like all found out that I had this issue, I went to go seek a 30-day treatment center. And I was like, well, now I'm using again. And I just made the decision I'm going to have to use until like I can't use anymore, either jail or going into another treatment program. I was like, I might as well go out with a bang. And so the guilt and shame, it's just like it builds, it compounds. Your physical addiction gets bigger. And it's like, I think that's why we see a lot of people whenever they are in and out of these programs. That's why they're using it always gets worse, is because they're like, I need to, if I'm going to do it, then I might as, it sucks that I'm even doing this. So I don't care about the impressions that people have of me. I'm just going to go for it. And I think that's what happened to me. It's like my limiters, my brakes were off. You know what I mean? It's like, I didn't have school going on. I didn't have any of this other stuff. I didn't have perceptions to worry about. The only thing that was happening was that I was feeling worse and worse and worse every time I did it. So I was using more and more and more to try to cover up the pain that I was feeling.
Well, what was the final straw? Like, what made you quit for good?
Well, I was using roughly 27 pills a day, which is a lot, 27, 30 milligram Percocet a day for about 10 days. And that's a lot of additives. So I'm like lucky to be breathing. And I know that, and I don't ever question that or like that. The gravity of that doesn't escape me at all daily. Like I'm very lucky to be breathing, that my organs didn't fail from doing that much. And the straw for me was, I remember sitting across the table from my dad and my mom, two extremely smart people. And the cat was out of the bag again. And so they looked at me and they were like, we don't care what you do, but you are not going to do it here. And we're willing to support you so long as you choose recovery. But we don't know how to help you, and we don't know what that looks like for you. So you're going to have to, like, you have to just move on from here. Like, you can't do it here. You can be homeless somewhere else. You can be homeless here, but you're not going to be in this house anymore. And even then, I was still wrestling with an idea of like how I could get out of it. And for me, it was on my way back to a 30-day treatment center that I'd already been to, that I BS'd my whole way through. I was crouched down inside of an airplane, smoking pills off of foil. And I thought to myself, this is U.S. federal airspace. I have a prescription pills that are not my prescription, and I'm smoking on an airplane. So if I were to get caught right now, like, I'm going down for a very long time. And I still kept doing it. And I was like, I have an addiction issue, and I'm an addict, and I need to figure this out. That was the straw that broke the back, was when I made the realization and I accepted the fact that I was just like everybody else in there. I just wasn't getting caught.
And after that, you were able to get through the program and stay clean.
Yeah. I mean, it was, what happened is that I went and did that 30-day treatment center again. And it was kind of like reminiscent of what I was going through in elementary school. They tried slapping me with a label of bipolar disorder. very early on. And anybody who knows anything about addiction or the brain in general will tell you that that's not necessarily ethical. Like, you can slap me with like a preemptive diagnosis and like we can watch it for some months. But when you're removing chemicals from people's brains and you're trying to have their brain reset and reach homeostasis, their bodies and their brains, the brain's going to be doing mental backflips trying to reset itself. So there's going to be feelings of like anxiety, depression. There's going to be all these things that somebody's combating because their brain has been hijacked for so long. So they labeled me with bipolar. And I heard about this program called Treehouse Recovery, which I helped build their admissions department. I still help with admissions counseling for those guys, in addition to doing my life coaching and my success coaching that I do for myself now. And I talked to somebody on the phone. And when I spoke to him, he was like, I don't necessarily know that you need all those medications that you're on. Like, I went in taking one prescription medication that wasn't mine. And then I left with 15 prescription medications that were mine. So I went into a drug treatment program to deal with one prescription drug issue, and I came out with 15 more, which is insane to me. But
yeah,
yeah,
that's crazy. It's kind of like what is that about? Like, that's nuts.
It's so weird. And they do that so often because like there's all these things that are going on with post-acute withdrawal symptoms and everything else that people self-diagnose whenever they're getting healthy. And so, again, because the brain's doing mental backflips, they're trying to, they're imagine it like a dam, right? And it's like, we know that there's this huge crack right here. There's water gushing out. So we're gonna fix that one. And then now we notice all these extra little cracks. And so we're putting Band-Aids over top of all those little cracks that we see. Eventually, like, those Band-Aids are going to give way. The only way to do it is to rebuild the entire wall. You got to rebuild the whole structure.
I love it.
So,
I love it. What's your mission? What is your mission right now?
So as of right now, there's a lot of people not just in the legal profession, but in high schools, people that are like your son's age, a little bit older, and they're even more involved with technology than what we were. And they're even more susceptible to this age of not knowing how to truly connect with one another and not really understanding like what does it mean to understand and like go through my emotions, to not allow myself to be labeled, to be empowered. Like what do these things actually mean? And how do I bring up these things? Because again, like, I'm not speaking from it from a theoretical standpoint. Like, I'm somebody that's lived every single thing that I'm talking about right now. And there were signs of it long before I ever picked up opiates. Like, there were signs of it whenever I was 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And ultimately, the thing that saved my life was somebody having a conversation with me and just asking me, like, are you okay? And it was the way she asked, not just the words. I knew she was available for the answer. And for me, it's like I'm going through and I'm talking to these people about that because they're susceptible. Our whole entire generation and younger is susceptible to this. And I think it's awesome that like now there's a huge push towards like clean living and like healthy living and all this other stuff. It's like, that's amazing. The overall goal would be for no one to ever use any of these mind altering chemicals again, because you don't need it. And I think that my mission now is to raise the bottom up. Like, I would hope that my bottom, which honestly wasn't, I know people that have way gnarlier stories than mine. I know that like my story is one of high achievement and suffering in silence. Like, I just didn't talk about it. And I know that there's other people that went through a lot harder things than what I went through. But the goal is for everybody should be to bring the bottom up. And like, hopefully no one has to go through any of this stuff ever again. Right? Like, hopefully me telling these things to you, like when you're talking and you're thinking about your son, and hopefully you'll know things to like look for, and like you can catch this stuff before it ever gets to the point that it got to with me.
Yeah. And
then if that's the best thing that happens out of this conversation, then like I consider that like that's amazing, and like that's a win. Because now it's got and hopefully there's one other dad that's out there that's listening to this, and it'll be the same thing for them. And so my mission is to bring the bottom up. My mission is to arm parents, arm our students, arm our children with the information that they need to never have to go through what I went through. And beyond that, we started a lot of this conversation about, medications and all this other stuff. And it's just like, my other mission is to educate people and to encourage them to educate themselves. Like what I'm talking about is what's real for my situation, my circumstances, what I went through. Your situation, your circumstances, what you're going through is going to be different. So educate yourself and ask questions. Just don't, I love the fact that you told teachers absolutely not.
Yeah.
Right. It's like give me the facts first. And I feel like that, luckily I've always had that stroke in me where I always push back against authority, and I wanted to know why first. Like, give me your why, and then we'll talk about what it is and how. But, I encourage people to do that too, because all too often we just trust that that's how it's supposed to be. That like these people wouldn't hurt us just to hurt us or any of these other things. And it's not that they're hurting. It's just that they themselves are just doing what they're told to be doing. It's like, not to get too into anything. It's like Patricia and I were going back and forth on whether or not to vaccinate versus not vaccinate our daughter within the first couple of years of her being alive. And, not to say what it is that we did, but whenever we were asking the doctor, like I felt one way, she felt another way. And I asked the doctor, I was like, so what does this look like and why? And rather than like giving us a why, he just wrote down what he was going to be doing, like what the schedule was. And so we went off and we did our own research and we came up with our own determination. But the doctor just gave us the information that he had and that he's been telling, 1,000 other patients. He didn't take time to tell us about our child. You know what I mean? And it's like, I encourage people just to do research on things, because it's all too often that we just like trust the authorities, and we don't need to. Like, be your own authority is something else that I would encourage people to do.
I love it. I love it. How can people connect with you, Jacob?
So they can connect with me through email. You can reach out to me at jacob.e, so jacob.e @hopeguides.com, just like how it sounds. And then they can also like visit my website. There's links there that you can follow up with me. And again, that's hopeguides.com. And yeah, and I mean, anything, like if you have questions about how to get your loved one into treatment, what's the best treatment option for me? Like, again, so sorry to go on another rant here, but even when it comes to treatment, like not every single treatment is going to be the same. And so finding somebody that's going to take the time to understand you and your situation and help you find the best place, like that's what it is that people who I work with and what I do, that's what it is that we do for them on the treatment aspect. When it comes to professional success coaching, it's the same idea, figuring out who someone is and what's going to be best for them and following their goals for themselves. And like, ultimately, I would love to connect with anybody on any topic. I mean, we've covered a bunch here. Anything that people want to talk about, I'm more than willing to talk to them about. They can reach me through that email.
I love it, dude. Jacob, I want to say thank you for joining the show, man. This has been inspirational, and it's been really fun to chat, dude.
Yeah, no, I knew that it was going to be really fun.
I want to say thank you to Jake for hanging out with us today. Jake, man, great conversation. Thanks for putting yourself out there for other people to hear and take inspiration from. I know it's been a while since we recorded this, and I'm totally bad at getting the episodes out, but this was worth it, man. Thank you so much. Guys, please check him out, Jacob Evans, and let him know that you guys were touched by this interview. You guys could, again, follow me on social media. Let me know what's going on with you, what's going on in your life. I love hearing from you guys. Please rate and review this podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. It really helps me scale the show and help others who might need to hear some inspiration. Again, Facebook, Trey Downs, Instagram, TDowns80, and Twitter at DownsTrey, guys. Thank you so much for listening. You guys mean the world, and your comments and concerns and your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you, guys, and I'll talk to you later. Gotta play to win, try not to sin, better hope you make it.